morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ask the Theologian. I'm Dr. Randy White, and this is Tuesday, and we're glad you're back with us. We were off yesterday as we were doing some of the closing logistics for our Taos Prophecy Conference. I hope you were able to join us for that. If not, it's available at our website. It's also available on YouTube, and we are working on creating a page that all 7 sessions will be together so that you don't have 3 hours of broadcast time, because probably most of you can't sit for 3 hours and watch it. So we'll separate those broadcasts out and have it all together for you. And by later in the day, we will have a page where you can buy the Day of the Lord Project without paying the rush shipping on it, because you probably don't need that at this point. And great book. I hope you'll get it. Great notes for the Day of the Lord Project. We had just a fabulous time there. And I would encourage you also, we've got copies in hand ready to go of the King James Bible in America, an orthographic, historical, and textual investigation by Brian Ross, available at dispensationalpublishing.com. Check those out. And of course, the John Nelson Darby Academy and all the other good things that we're doing. I appreciate you. And thanks for letting us have a day off yesterday as we were taking people to the airport and got everybody back home and safe and now ready to go again for this week of broadcasting, in which we will be teaching on Wednesday night the parables of Jesus, and on Thursday night the book of Galatians verse by verse. And we've had a wonderful time just walking through Galatians verse by verse. This will be, I believe, session 3 for that, or maybe we're session 4. I don't know. We're just enjoying it along the way, and we will continue to do so, and I look forward to that. And let's look about taking your questions today, whether you are on YouTube or Facebook or Vimeo. And let me just say tonight, perhaps I can help you to find it even. Let's see, if you were to go to Facebook tonight, for those of you who happen to be Facebook friends with me, and find the Randy White page, there's where our broadcasts come up. And bring this up to size a little bit here. Tonight at, let's see, 8:15 p.m. Mountain Time, I will be on live with Cristiano, how's that? My brother Cristiano. I will be on live tonight with him, 8:15 Mountain Time. I think that's the correct time, is 8:15 Mountain Time. Now, he is in Brazil, and this will be in Portuguese and in English, and we're going to be talking about whether John 15 is a condition for salvation. Go to my Facebook page, facebook.com/Pastor Randy White, and send a friend request if you'd like, but it's all public as well. And find Cristiano and click that, and you'll be able to follow that tonight if you would like to do so. Again, that's 8:15 Mountain Time. And with that, now let's get into your questions that we have coming in. Charles says, let's see, has your opinion of Halloween changed since the Ask the Theologian program on October the 17th, 2017? I don't know. I would have to go back and check to see what my opinion of Halloween was on October the 17th, 2017. Probably it hasn't changed, but let me just give to you a brief view of what my view of Halloween is, and probably before this month is out, it'll come up a number of times, so I'll refine my thoughts a little more closely on this. But I think that there's 2 competing factors here. One is that Halloween today is a day which is used to promote devilish, demonic kinds of activities. I think that that's not something we want to rush headlong into and just pretend like all that doesn't exist. The other challenge is that is a day in which everybody in our society who has children, I say everybody, obviously there's always an exception, everybody in our society with children knows that there is something going on that day. Those of you who have children, you can't really completely shield your children from that and knowing that what that is. Now, is there a way, remember the Lord said to redeem the time, is there a way to redeem the holiday? I have tried before in the past saying, well, the church can have an activity. It's an alternative activity. It's going to be fun. It's going to be happy. It's going to involve candy, and we're going to share the gospel. My experience has been you get a lot of people and you get zero return. Don't be impressed by a church that has, 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people at their Halloween event. I can tell you this because our church in the Katy area, in the Houston area, Katy, the suburb, we literally would have 10,000 people come to the harvest celebration that we had, and we gave them gospel tracts and all this kind of stuff. Very little response. We did have a couple, one that listens to us to this day, that began coming to our church from that, but I can promise you it was not worth the money or the hours, and we shouldn't have patted ourselves on the back saying we had 10,000 people, because those 10,000 people, honestly, they would have come if the Mormon church had done it. They would have come if the city had done it. They would have come if, the Devil's Tabernacle had done it. They were there for the candy and the free stuff. And so I am zero impressed by a church that gets a crowd for that. Okay, that is even more so than Christmas. That is the easiest time to get people in your building. The benefit with Christmas is at least they come and they sit in the auditorium and you have some sacred music and you talk about the Christ child, and hopefully you share the gospel, and it's a church service. These Halloween things aren't church services, and I can promise you, if you said we're going to have a Halloween church service, we're going to talk about salvation, we're going to talk about the devil, we're going to talk about those who have gone before us, whatever it is, I can promise you they will not come. You'll have your regular crowd of old people with no kids, and, there'll be 4 of them or 8 of them. Now, if you can get 10,000 people to come to a worship service on Halloween, then I'll be impressed. If you get 10,000 people to come because you're handing out candy and have free rides, whoop-de-doo. Anybody can do that. Honestly, I could establish a little business today, and I could charge a $5 entry fee, and I could be rich, and I could make it happen. It works. Now, one of the reasons why our church won't do it is because, one, it has little return, no return, I would even say. And secondly, I live in a town that has a big thing down in the plaza 2 blocks from here, and 10,000 people will be there, and they'll all get free candy. And why in the world should we do that? I see no reason. And that's true, I think, in most communities, that now it's, become what I think it's the second or third largest holiday in terms of sales that retailers have. It's a huge thing. So we can't pretend like it doesn't exist. It does exist. We ought to figure out, how do we redeem it? How can we, at best, try to share the gospel a little bit? Participate in it? I have some mixed feelings there. I think most of us probably grew up participating in Halloween. And yet Halloween was a much more friendly kind of activity in the 1970s than it was today. And we put on a plastic mask with a string around it, and we went and said trick or treat, and we got some candy, and it was a fun thing. And we didn't have kind of the satanic influence that was given onto that today. So I think probably if I had kids today, I would have something at the house, and we might bob for apples, and we might do some fall activities, and we might have some candy, and we might have some fun, and we would make it a fun day. And we might talk about the snake in the garden. We might talk about the devil. We might talk about death and what happens at death. And I think that there is some truth to the fact that Halloween goes way back in time to celebrate Satan. As a matter of fact, Bishop Usher, who did that chronology, he has October the 31st. He dated things, the date of creation and everything. He has October the 31st as the date that Satan fell from heaven. Now, Bishop Usher did his work in, I don't know, somebody Google it for me and find out. 1600s, 1700s, well before modern Halloween came about. And so this October 31st associated with Satan has a long, long history. Now, my theory is steal everything you can from Satan. He's a cheat and a thief anyway. And so if we could make that into something useful, let's try to do so. Through that. Now, let me refine those thoughts through the month and see where we come. Pastor Roger out in California. Today, sins are not imputed because of Jesus Christ. He became sin for us. Before the law, since sin was not imputed, according to Romans 5:13, what happened to those sins? Christ had not died. The sins before the law were not put upon him, upon Christ, or were they, he says, or were they simply null and void? So let's go to Romans chapter 5, verse 13. This is a passage of Scripture that I think so many people somewhat ignore. Romans 5:13. For until the law, and that's talking about the Mosaic law, the Torah, until the law, sin was in the world. But sin is not imputed when there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned. Okay, we know that, according to 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 19, verse 21, that sin is not imputed today. We know that sin was being imputed, that is counted. Sin is not counted today because Christ has taken the sins upon himself. And it was counted during the times of the law, and it was atoned for during the times of the law through the sacrifices. Now, what about this verse that says prior to the law, sin was in the world but not imputed when there is no law? Now, let's try to think of this for just a moment. When cars were just coming about, there was no speed limit. And towns began to say, you know, these people are driving like reckless maniacs through here. Well, now that there's one car, two cars, a dozen cars, 100 cars, towns and municipalities began to realize we've got to do something to slow people down. Now, they made some sort of ordinance, probably, you know, the speed limit's 35 miles an hour. And that's going to go into effect on January the 1st, 1920. And December the 31st, 1919, 40 miles an hour was 40 miles an hour. But 40 miles an hour was not imputed against them. Now that there's a law, then the policeman stops you, he writes you a ticket, you have to pay for it. You didn't the day before, you do the day of, or the day and following. So it's just this matter of logic that whether you're talking about the Torah or anything, that until the law, sin was to the Torah. What law did they have to live by? The truth is that maybe you could narrow it down, add one or two more, but the only prohibition that man had received was do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the truth was, they couldn't if they wanted to, because the tree was forbidden. They had already eaten from it, from one, but they couldn't get into the garden to eat from it. So everything else was pretty much open. There was certainly right and wrong, but sin is not imputed. There was nothing on the law books that you could count that against a person. And so what happened? Now, the question is, before the law, Roger says, since sin was not imputed, what happened to those sins? Christ had not died. The sins before the law were not put upon him. That's exactly right. So were they null and void? Well, in one sense, yes. In another sense, it doesn't matter. So, prior to, again, our fictitious date of January the 1st, 1920, the people drove, 50 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, it didn't matter. They did that which was not a good thing to do. They did it, but it was null and void. Didn't matter, right? Now, nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses. Even those over them who had not sinned after the similitude of Adam's transgression, who is the figure of him who is to come. Now, let's take this section right here. They didn't sin the one sin that had been prohibited, that is, again, to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So they didn't have a sin after the similitude of Adam's. There was no similarity. So they didn't have that kind of sin.